This week on Crunch Week, we're talking about Bitcoin volatility, Tim Draper's 6 Californias proposal, and Jack Dorsey giving equity back to Square. Hi, I'm Leena Rao. Welcome to Crunch Week.
I'm Colleen Taylor.
And I'm Alex Wilhelm.
Well, this week, we're heading into the holidays,
Thank
of
God.
course, but it was still like a newsworthy sort of week. I thought we had some interesting things happen. First, of course, Bitcoin volatility. I mean, a lot of news in Bitcoin, as usual, though. Yeah,
it goes up, and then it goes down, and it goes up again, down again, and we kind of just keep in this circular process. It's been really fun to watch. If you're into chart porn, this is like the best of all chart porn.
Chart porn.
Well, because
I think you had some chart porn this week, right?
I did lots of it. I cannot help myself.
Well, what was the bottom that it really got to? Because it had been trading at like more than $1,000 per Bitcoin, and then it got to like 500 or less.
Yeah, I think it dipped under 500 at some point in time. And people were actually sending me tweets like, get out of bed, wake up, go cover Bitcoin. And I was like just completely asleep during that entire time. But it bounced down very low, you're right. It was over 1,200 or so on Mt. Gox, one of the bigger exchanges. And then it fell down to under $500. And then it's back up right now to around 700. So yeah, that's the correct facial expression. What?
Well, okay, I have a question. Yeah. So it seems like everyone was talking about Bitcoin like earlier this year, maybe around the springtime, and then all of a sudden, like no one started talking. Like it was like, but over the summer, maybe like July, August, early September, just wasn't a lot of chat around it.
Now, I don't know who you're talking to though. I feel like people have been. It's been like Bitcoin all year.
But
like,
well, no, Lena's right. Here's what happened. There was a big spike in April to about $250 of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Everyone lost their shit collectively, and then it went down to like 50, and everyone was like, "Well, that's over." There was a huge media interest trough that they were reacting to.
That's what I meant more. The media interest.
And then, as you might expect, when it was at 1,200, media was insane and has been declining over time. So I think that's going to be kind of negative for Bitcoin's price if there's less incitement in the media to drive more speculation.
Well, when there's a currency that has such big spikes and troughs like this, I mean, can this really be a serious currency? This takes away, the feeling of security that people would have with it. I mean, the dollar fluctuates, but like it's nothing
4%
like
a year compared to the yen, not like 35% in one afternoon.
Right.
Because if you're a business and you want to accept Bitcoin and you set a price and then all of a sudden you wake up, you sell 10 widgets, and then the Bitcoin's worth half as much the next day, you just got owned.
Right. Wasn't it just like a week ago that someone had bought a Tesla? This was a perfect California story. Yeah. Someone had bought a Tesla electric car for with Bitcoin, using Bitcoin. So whatever, 1,000, they used 50 Bitcoin to buy it. But then, of course, a week later, those 50 Bitcoin are now worth $25,000 instead of $50,000. And so,
that dealer got, totally.
So it's the opposite of caveat emptor.
Right. It's the seller beware.
Yeah. Well, our own John Biggs broke a story actually this morning around the Silk Road, and so honestly, I'm very confused about the Silk Road. Why is this such a big deal for Bitcoin?
Okay, so Silk Road mattered because it was a very large exchange that used Bitcoin. So if you bought Bitcoin, you could buy stuff on Silk Road. So there was a real use for the Bitcoin people had. It gave it an inherent utility, which gave it value. Then the guy who founded Silk Road tried to kill some people using Bitcoin, and that was bad. People decided collectively that you shouldn't kill people, and so Silk Road was shut down. And then there
was some drug stuff happening, right? People were using Bitcoin to buy drugs.
People use dollars to buy drugs in the Tenderloin. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. It was the murder for hire thing that was the real unraveling.
Well, and that's the problem with Bitcoin. In some ways, since there isn't a checks and balances, and this doesn't go through the Fed, and these banks aren't really monitored, it's completely anonymous.
Right.
And so
almost completely anonymous.
Right. So a lot of people would think, because you can still track things back, and that's how ultimately they have been able to track down some people. But so Silk Road number 1 was shut down, and then in its shadow rose Silk Road number 2, and that's what John Biggs reported on this morning, that even Silk Road number 2 is now getting attention from the feds, and a couple of the very prominent people who've been involved in it have been tracked down to their homes and taken into custody.
Silk Road 2 is like new Coke. But what happened this week that caused a major price fluctuation in Bitcoin was the shutting down of local currency deposits on BTC-China, the biggest Chinese exchange for Bitcoin, which really limits the influx of new hard currency into Bitcoin. And given the prominence of Chinese transactions as part of Bitcoin itself, that's depressed the price. People assumed just bad.
Yeah. So, and you were, China is one of the biggest sort of users of Bitcoin, is that correct? Yeah. So that's a big loss for the...
Right, because it lowers momentum, right? I mean, the whole point of a speculative bubble is that it gets hotter, and then goes up, and then if you just kind of cut a lot of the momentum, you have a price decrease of, as John Biggs reported, about 50% overnight, which is huge. I mean, it's a terrifying price swing. If that happened to oil, it would cause wars, you know?
Right.
Well, it'll be interesting to see in 2014 what Bitcoin ends up becoming, if it becomes more legitimized or if it just goes downhill.
No comment.
Well, of course, a lot of chatter today about Tim Draper's California's proposal. What do you think about that, Colleen?
Well, this is a huge scoop for TechCrunch. Greg Ferenstein had the first news of this. He was personally corresponding with Tim Draper, and Tim Draper said to him, first of all, Tim Draper, you should know, is a very prominent venture capitalist. He is sort of part of a dynasty of venture capitalists. I think his father was a venture capitalist. The Draper name has been known in Silicon Valley for decades. And he's from Draper Fisher Jurvetson, funded a lot of very important companies, and now he's in his 50s. He's wealthy, and he's kind of taking a step back from day-to-day work as a venture capitalist. And everyone was kind of speculating as to what he was going to be working on next, and now it's clear he wants to do some political things. He wants to put forward a proposal to split the state of California into 6 separate states. And the real main focus of this, from his perspective, seems to be turning Silicon Valley into its own state. Because if you look at this map and the way the lines are drawn, some of them don't really make any sense. You think,
I was
why
looking
would
at the
someone
map.
split?
I mean, it's crazy. It seems like it's just like some random person drew a crayon and then just put segregated
except for the Silicon Valley area.
I think they got drunk first, then they picked up the crayon. Of all the things that are not going to happen ever, this is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, the water rights, just to start off with, I mean, would be economically catastrophic for different parts of this new hybrid state. I mean, no.
Right.
You can't just do this.
Yeah, there's
And
this whole
6?
section in Central Valley where anyone who's really spent a lot of time in California knows this is where all the farms are, but not known for being really economically incredibly strong, but like it's, the breadbasket or the fruit and vegetable basket of California, and they're cut off from the water supply, which is north of it, and so that is never gonna hit. It just, some of the districting just doesn't quite make sense.
Do you guys think this is going to be like more fodder for kind of the outside Silicon Valley world, thinking that we're just like totally, well, not us at this table, but some
us
people
too.
At Silicon Valley are just totally crazy and obsessed with capitalism and obsessed with money, and that's like the culture that we're breeding here.
We are capitalists. We are obsessed with money, and we like technology. That's our catalyst for how we do it. I mean, no one gets into business and goes, you know what, I want to make zero profit. I want to lose all my money and become a disgrace and have no influence and clout. I mean, no. I mean,
the weird thing, though, about people in the tech sector, but not all people in the tech sector, because I know some lovely people who think holistically about the world and understand how economies work, but some people in the tech sector think that you can just ignore everything else that happens in the world. We think of these gleaming sort of Google and Yahoo and Facebook and these companies where everybody is just at a computer all day and think that scales out. And
it doesn't.
That it doesn't. There are farms, and there are people who move shipping containers around, and you go to the Port of Oakland, and there's manufacturing. There are so many different things that make a society work, and the problem that this proposal just shows is that you think you can just, let's segment this over here and have a techno-utopia, and we don't need that other stuff.
That sounds so boring.
I mean, that whole idea of a techno-utopia, Greg pointed out in his post, is like, there's a lot of other VCs who are also sort of for kind of thinking that way. I mean, not necessarily the same framework that Tim Draper has adopted, but Peter Thiel kind of has his whole vision of that, and then even like Sergey Brin kind of has his whole vision of that. So I mean, it's just kind of, I don't know. There's something kind of weird about that. I'm sure from an outsider's point of view, it looks a little odd.
Yeah, there could be something to be said for splitting things up. I mean, a lot of people think that everything is too big to be manageable. Some people think that the United States should be sectioned off. It is just a massive thing, and it can be hard to make big things like that work.
Didn't we have a war about that?
Yeah, right.
Well, before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about some recent news around Square, and basically that founder and CEO Jack Dorsey has decided to give 10% of his equity and shares in in Square back to the company, which is kind of an unprecedented sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't happen very often at all. And why he would do that would be sort of to give the company the ability to give those options to employees and so on, or future employees. But it's an interesting sort of twist, and I wonder if this is going to be a model that other CEO and founders at a later stage company will end up doing.
Well, after the Twitter IPO, I think he's doing fine financially.
That's probably
He
true
won't be
too.
scrounging for quarters in the sofa.
From what I saw, I mean, Square's still a private company, so it's hard to know exactly what the valuation of that is. But I think they said that they're worth around 150 million, which, Alex, you're totally right. I don't think that's like worth that much to him.
I mean, that would explode my mind, but like for me,
Yeah.
but I mean, for him, it's 10% of equity in one company he's founded. So
Yeah.
like,
It's
I mean,
10% of the equity that he had been holding also. He held 30% worth of Square, and he's given up 3% of that 30%. And so it's 10% of what he had been holding, right?
Right, I think so.
well, I want to be good on him. I like the move.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too cynical about this. But
No, I know you're the sort of you are the cynic, but no, I agree. Like I think that's actually he didn't have to do it. I mean, we've seen plenty of founders who have made money in other companies who don't necessarily do it. So I'm sort of curious. Like in 2014, are we going to see more founders do that?
Yeah.
Well, Zuck did the Bill Gates like billionaire thing, right?
That's
He's going to give away
right.
all of his money.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So-
right. We'll see if anyone else joins that as well.
Right.
Well, that's all the time that we have this week. Definitely join us next week.